Okay, I had said that this system is going to get more complicated. And just like everything we've been talking about, it's super important that we keep up and keep remembering and reviewing and reviewing and reviewing and reviewing, because it's very normal to sit here and go, oh, I get it, I get it, I get it. But then when it comes to replicating the whole thing again, it's hard for you to do it when there's been a space. So what I would strongly recommend is that you continue to review this almost daily. I would ask you to continue to spend time charting it out. And of course, the very best thing to do would be to teach it. So whoever you said, hey, do you want to stimulate your medial forebrain bundle? You now need to say to them, I'd like to give you a lecture on neurobiology, and see if they're as interested in that. Do you think your wife will go for that, Brian? No. Okay, let's go to the next slide. All right, this is a very messy slide. Messy, 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 messy. And what I'm about to tell you, I do not expect you to replicate on a quiz. So calm down. What I'm about to say is going to be just an opportunity for you to listen to something and go, okay, I get that, but what brain power I have, I don't have to memorize this. The thing that makes this so complicated are all these little pluses and minuses. So before we get there, let's just review what we do know. And again, we know that this is a terminal button, and these are neurotransmitters. These are receptors. And this is a dendrite. This is our synapse, and we have seen where the merging has happened, the vesicle has merged, and we've seen that the neurotransmitters are released, and we now have, again, a reuptake pump, reuptake port. It is not very fancy. It's certainly not like the carnival ride on the last one we saw, but it functions. Here's a couple of things that, as I said, don't worry about this. Just listen to it, absorb it. Don't, freak out. But what causes that electricity? I've already said that when a neurotransmitter rests on a receptor and connects with that, it causes a little electrical charge, okay? But once that charge is moving along, there are changes in terms of ions that are inside the cell and ions that are outside of the cell. In this picture, ions can either be positive or negative. And when they move, that creates electricity. So the minus ones are chloride ions, and the positive ones are sodium. Okay. There are other ones that we're going to have a chart on in just a minute. So already we know, just from what we've just said, there's positive and negative ions, and when they move in and out of the cell, there's going to create an electrical charge. I'll go into that in a little more detail in just a minute. But I did want to point out another kind of heresy. This is heresy, right? I've been telling you receptors are on the dendrites. And one of the ways to know the picture is because you can see receptors. Heresy. There's always got to be something that breaks the rule to prove the rule, right? Look at this. It says autoreceptor. What the heck is a receptor doing up on that terminal button? They're not supposed to be there. That's heresy. The receptors are supposed to be on the dendrites. And now we found a receptor, or something called a receptor, on an end button. That's heresy. Well, here's, if we could close the door a second, here's one of the things that is wonderful about this system. It is working continually to keep you in balance. So, for example, if you are making too many neurotransmitters, some of them could actually get into the autoreceptor, and that could say to the cell, whoa, you're making a lot here, maybe you ought to slow down production. So the autoreceptor, you don't have to remember this, just know that it's there to help the system stay in balance. Okay, let's go to the next slide. I don't get it. Can you go over it again? All right, here we go. All right. We have had action potential, and we know action potential is when that electrical charge happens. Now we're going to learn about resting potential, okay? So when the cell is resting, in other words, when there's not that electrical charge going through, it says certain ions are outside the cell membrane and certain ions are kept inside the cell membrane. Sodium and chloride are outside and potassium's inside. The neuron works like crazy to make this very distinctive state, okay? Certain ones outside, certain ones inside. Potassium inside, sodium and chloride outside. When you look at this cell and you see that, you say, okay, this is a resting cell, okay? And you guessed it. When the neuron is excited, the exact opposite occurs, and the resting potential is restored in repolarization. You don't have to memorize that word. You don't have to remember this. You just have to hear it. Next one. So, in an action potential, when the electrical charge actually is happening, the permeability of the cell changes. So gateways will open up in the cell, and it will allow sodium and chloride to come in, and it will allow potassium to rush out. And gradually, the negative charge inside the cell changes to a positive charge, and this is called depolarization. Again, you don't have to memorize that. Just go, oh, that's interesting. So basically, the action potential, for the simplicity of our purposes, you just need to know that when that electrical charge is happening, ions are rushing in and other ones are rushing out, and then it restores itself. Okay, go on. If you care about this, you can read this slide and talk more about how this happens. But for today's purposes, we're just going to pass this by, but some of you might care about that and want to come back and read it. Well, do you understand all of this stuff, John? Yeah, I think I'm beginning to get it. Okay. Okay, what I want to point out is what they have done is enlarged this, so that this box is this enlarged picture here. The other thing I want to point out is heresy upon heresy. Oh no, how can it be? It looks like these end buttons from another cell are touching that cell body. Is that accurate? No. Absolutely not. So it appears that they're touching, but in reality there is a space there. We know that. Okay, so nice job. Very nice job. Let's move on. Okay. Again, we've been talking about these ions that float in and out, okay? So there are a variety of different kinds of receptors. Sometimes these ions float out because the receptor actually has a part of it that opens and closes, okay? And in some cases, when a neurotransmitter, looks like an upside down hat here, fits onto a receptor, and this is a specific kind of receptor, it's going to cause, this 2 means something going on inside the cell. We know one of the things that causes is a small bit of electrical charge, but it also does other things. It communicates, and it communicates with different enzymes. There's lots of enzymes. There's the kind that we've been talking about that destroys the neurotransmitters, but there's enzymes that actually go back into the receptor and say, open up and let some ions in. In a few minutes, we're going to see that there is communication. This is the nucleus of the cell here, and there's communication with the DNA inside the cell. This is the part that gets confusing. Let's go on to the next slide. Okay, so just a quick review. Resting is when there's a negative charge naturally in the cell. It's naturally negative. And potassium is in and sodium's out. And when there's an action potential, it becomes positive because sodium comes in and potassium goes out. You don't have to memorize that. Let's go on. Okay. So we were saying, well, what causes the axon hillock to say yes, go, go, go? So it could be some cells, in this case, or some receptors, in this case just represented by one, that keeps getting hit over and over and over. Now, it wouldn't just be one. It would be maybe 20,000, okay? So go ahead and show that. And it keeps getting hit over and over, and then it goes. Or it can be multiple receptors being charged and hit it again, and then that causes an action potential. So it can either be a fewer number getting hit over and over and over again, or lots getting hit once. Okay, let's go, keep going. Okay, this is a better picture than some of the pictures we've seen, but this is still inadequate because we can't really draw 50,000 connections. But this picture at least shows that there is lots of connection between multiple end buttons talking to multiple dendrites and receptors. So that's a good picture. This is again a terrible, horrible, no good, very bad picture, but let's go on. This picture I think is helpful. When we talk about serotonin or any kind of neurotransmitter, we say as if it's just a single thing. But in reality, it has multiple impacts. So the neurotransmitter is the master key, okay? And it can do many, many, many things. It's like the janitor who has the master key who can open up any classroom, any office, anything. It's a master key. Some people only get part of the keys. So they have the key to their classroom and their office, but they can't go around opening everybody else's office. So they don't have the master key. Okay. When we think of any neurotransmitter, and this is really, really, really important, we are talking predominantly about drug impacts of neurotransmitters, but we have to remember neurotransmitters do other things. They have something to do with muscle tone. They have something to do with our emotional response. They have lots of factors. So they do many things. Remember a few minutes ago we were talking about SSRIs. SSRIs, okay, selective serotonin. What that means is that if this is serotonin, and we know serotonin is implicated in depression, we want to select the part of serotonin that's affecting depression, and we want to be selective for that. Unfortunately, SSRIs have other side effects. We hoped they wouldn't when they first came out, but they do. And in fact, one of the side effects that they have that people are discouraged about is serotonin has something to do with sexual desire and function. And so unfortunately, people who often take SSRIs have a decreased ability to perform sexually and to enjoy sex. And so that's not good. It would be nice if we could just treat the depression, right? And not mess with people's sexual function. So all of these drugs, the side effects have to do with the fact that when dopamine is impacted, it's going to impact other parts that affect dopamine. Same with any of the drugs. So that's what we were talking about, whether it's pharmaceutical or street drugs. Go on. So here's a quick little slide that says dopamine has to do with euphoria, agitation, paranoia, and we know that because people who've taken amphetamines and cocaine that work on dopamine know those things happen. We know that GABA is your don't stress, be calm, be cool. It inhibits you. It causes you to be relaxed, drowsy. It can impact depression and sedation. And so alcohol and Valium-like drugs do that. Serotonin is sleep, relaxation, sedation, and it's the major drug impacted by LSD, and so on and so forth. We'll go over each one of these when we cover each of the specific drugs, so we're not going to worry about that right now. Let's go on. And this is just also saying, let's talk about dopamine. It has to do with also muscle tone. So who would know that? So people with Parkinson's, for example, who have movement problems, have dopamine being affected. So we think dopamine, drug addiction, but it has other factors depending on where it's working in the brain. Okay, so I like this slide. I just put this in the last year or so. When you fall in love, you are drug affected, basically. your brain is having all kinds of interesting things happen. You have decreased pain sensitivity, you have increased pleasure, increased motivation, decreased sadness, and so on and so forth. I'm not going to go into this. We have more important things to get to right now, but I just wanted to let that be something that we just make a comment about. I'm going to skip this YouTube as well because Rick, I think, can implant this in when we do it, but we can go into some other kinds of things. I also wanted to talk about your baby's brain and how all kinds of things we're looking at have to do with the level of neurotransmitters that the baby gets at birth, hereditarily. Our good friend Amber has the happiest, sweetest, kindest, you just want to pick him up, a little guy who was born happy. He was born happy. And so the suspicion is no matter what happens in his life, he's probably going to end up to be a happy human being. Okay. So this is very true. There's nothing like love and safety to help my brain grow to the best of its ability. Okay. Okay. Basically, all I want to say here is that these connections that you have in your brain naturally get pruned. It's healthy that they get pruned. And so when you're a little infant, your brain is just growing, massively growing. And at some point, it starts getting some of the connections. It's use it or lose it. So if you're not exposed to a language at a certain age, clip it away. And that doesn't mean that you can't learn language, but the best way to learn language is 0 to 1 when you're being exposed to language in general. Same is true, most parents know, you know, it's unfortunate, but your child is probably not going to be a professional athlete unless they're introduced to sports quite young, so that their brain learns how to use those neurons so that they can function. And so there are natural pruning times that happen. Okay, so neurotransmitters. We've been talking a lot about them. There are several dozen known neurotransmitters, and lo and behold, how many? Several hundred to several thousand neurotransmitters. How can we be expected to know all that? Okay, keep going. So we make them. We make them by the foods we eat and how we take care of our body and as we rest. And the good news about neurotransmitters is they don't need real complicated food. Because if they did, you can imagine as a species, when we went through famines and we went through times when food wasn't available, we wouldn't do very well. So they're pretty basic food groups that make them, okay? Okay, so for something to be a neurotransmitter, you already know all this. It has to be located in the presynaptic terminal button. It has to be released when that neuron is stimulated. It has to bind to receptors of the postsynaptic neuron and alter excitability there. You know this. And drugs that interfere with those steps must alter the neurochemical events in a predictable manner. Okay. Glutamate and GABA are the majority of our neurons. So we've been talking about dopamine and serotonin. What we really should be talking about, if we're looking at just numbers of neurons and neurotransmitters, are glutamate and GABA. Those are our primary ones. Okay. And I want to stop here a second. We've already talked about this. You saw the slide earlier. A neurotransmitter is only going to work if it matches something that's natural in the brain. And Bob pointed out accurately so that I had spelled serotonin right. So I stand corrected. I appreciate when you correct me. Okay, let's go on. And this slide you haven't seen before. There's dopamine, norepinephrine, both of which are natural neurotransmitters. And lo and behold, there's amphetamine, a methamphetamine and ephedrine. Look at the similarity in terms of structure. Is it any big surprise that amphetamine, methamphetamine, and ephedrine work on the dopamine and norepinephrine receptors? They're similar enough that they work on those receptors. Okay? This is the part that's hard. This is the part that I can almost guarantee you might get when I say it, but you'll forget it and mix it up. And it will show up on a test. I can't say it more clearly. You have to know this. It's complicated, but not that complicated. And that's why we're going to act it out. something called upregulation and downregulation. The simple way of saying it is upregulation means that you actually build more receptors. What? What are you saying? I'm saying that your dendrites can have an increase in receptors and actually can take away receptors. Fascinating. Let's look at that. Okay. Here's the picture. Up here at the top we have that upside down hat that is meant to represent a neurotransmitter. When it finds its receptor, it has a connection with that receptor and it causes changes in the cell. This is illustrating a bunny rabbit for rapid reproduction, okay? So for whatever reason, which I'm about to show you in a few minutes, this cell is getting the information. You need more receptors. You need more. So messages get to the DNA of the cell that says, pump up production. We need more. And so all of a sudden, there are more receptors being made in the cell and popping up through the membrane. Now, what would cause that? Let me go and explain that. And I'm going to ask you just to kind of hang with me a minute. Okay. If I whispered and I was about to tell you that there's a $100 bill somewhere that you can get to if you listen really carefully, you would listen really carefully. And for the sake of the taping, I'll say that a little bit louder. But what I said was, if there's a $100 bill and I'm speaking softly and you know you can get to that $100 bill if you listen carefully, you really perk up your hearing. You really pay attention. Okay, so you're listening more carefully. In the same way, your cell is listening more carefully. So what I'd like, you know how our friend over here was our receptor and all he had to do was stand here like this? So I would like you 5 people to come on up and just stand here like this. All right, you don't have to. So just stand here, come up right by me. Come here and stand. Okay. And yeah, don't stand. Let's move. Actually, we'll put you between here. Let's leave that there. And we'll put you here, Dana. Okay. Come on there. And you can go there. Okay. And that's good. And then let's have 2 people sit on the chairs. Now, the chairs represent the fact that these have not been made yet. Okay. One more, John? Yeah. Okay, so I can't push this wall back further, so the way I'm illustrating that the people sitting on the chairs have not been made yet, okay? So if you 4 gentlemen would stand up, please. You're going to have multi-roles today, Larry. Okay. This big space here is going to represent our synapse, okay? And unfortunately, I've been using kind of love examples, so shake that away. When a neurotransmitter finds its receptor, let's not use a love example right now. Let's just say it makes a connection. They're good friends, okay? So
going off for coffee.
Yeah, they're going off for coffee. So this is the terminal button right now. This whole part of the room is the terminal button. And somehow or another, these guys were in vesicles, and they got released into the synapse, okay? Now, in a healthy cell, we said, for the sake of our example, 50% of them are going to find a connection with a receptor. So you guys are floating in the cell, doing your thing, la-di-da. 2 of you make a connection, and the other 2 just keep floating around. So just go up to that person. You can go just like this. Okay? So, okay. And oh, we're going to pull you out. Okay. So, this is working. This is a healthy brain. This is a healthy body. This is good connection. You guys come on out. Okay, you've done your thing. I'm going to recycle you. There you go. There you go. There you go. And unfortunately, one of you got eaten and destroyed. Okay. So step back a minute. Okay, step back just for a second. Okay. So now this cell's resting. Okay. Now somebody took a drug. Oh no, they took a drug. And what happened is it caused fewer neurotransmitters to be released into the synapse. So last time we had 4. Now we're only going to have 2 because it has been a problem. The person took a drug, and now only, again, some of them are actually going to make a connection. And so go ahead and stand up right there. Okay. So we see this brain is having a problem, right? They're not getting enough stimulation. It's not getting what it needs to be normal. Because we said in the past, 50% have to be working for it to be normal. This person took a drug, it caused less neurotransmitters to be made, and so now we're in crisis. Okay, come back here a second. So, you two stand by me. And so what we have is a crisis. And the brain and the neuron is going, oh no, I was getting, how many originally? Two connections out of 4, and now I'm only getting 1 connection out of 4. I gotta do something. Well, what's one thing I could do? One thing I could do is to make more receptors. So stand up, gentlemen. You are now made, okay? Now, when this person still has taken the same drug, and they have still only 2 coming out, there's a better chance that all 2 will find a place to connect because there's so many more receptors. Okay? We got it? All right. So neurotransmitters, come back, please. Now, our receptors stay there. Okay. And so you guys just move over there a minute. Okay. So let's review this. Originally, sit down, our people who have not been made yet. Okay. So the brain, in a healthy brain, for our purposes of example, we're saying 50% of the receptors have to be activated. If there's something wrong with the brain, that there aren't enough neurotransmitters making a normal connection, there's too few of them for some reason, the brain is going to help. And it's going to say, I'm going to help you out. I'm going to actually make more, so the odds of getting 50% are going to happen because we have more opportunity now for you to connect. That is called upregulation. You're making more. You're regulating up. Okay. Well, you guessed it. Now we can have the opposite. So stand up, gentlemen, please. Let's say, now, again, for the sake of example, this is going to be a little confusing because now I'm going to say this is normal. This was an illustration. All these people standing was upregulation a few minutes ago. But now, shift your brain, shake it out. This is now normal, okay? So we've had our normal. Let's act it out again. Let's be normal. You guys come on over. 50% of you make a connection. Okay, okay. All right, good, good. And actually, let's have you 3 stand up as well, please. Okay. Come on over. Okay. Okay, all right, good, good, good. Now, you're out here too, so there you go. So we had actually a lot more receptors. So we actually, or neurotransmitters, we actually have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 50% found a home, okay? Now, here's interesting, very interesting. Somebody took a drug, and it caused a huge amount of neurotransmitters to be released. So would all of you stand up? Come on over here. Okay, find a receptor. Oh my gosh, we have an illustration now of not 50% finding a home. This person's experiencing a major drug effect, okay? This person has so many of their receptors filled that they are massively altering their brain, okay? So all of you neurotransmitters, come back and come over here a minute. Stand over here and right here. Okay? Yes, yes, that is withdrawal, isn't it? Yeah. Okay, so let's assume that this person continues to take drugs and it continues to alter the brain by filling way too many receptors. The brain is going, oh no, this person's trying to kill me. Okay, I'm going to help them out because I'm going to take away receptors. So now would 3 of you sit back down like you did before? Okay, so the brain has also down regulation where it can remove receptors. Okay, so when there's too much noise, let me give you an example. How many have been to a rock concert? Okay, when you go to the rock concert and you're into the grooving and, well, yeah, it's cool, and then you come out, what happens to your hearing? You can't hear very well, right? Because it's an example of the same thing. Your body, your ears said, this person's killing me. They're bombarding your ears, so let's tune down the hearing. And then when you come back out, you can't hear very well for a while, but then you gradually get back to normal, unless you've done that way too many times and damaged your hearing. Okay, hold on 1 minute. I'll come to questions in just a minute. So when the person floods the brain with too many neurotransmitters or agonists, right? Drugs that look like, let's say I am not a neurotransmitter. I don't look like you guys completely, but I look enough like you guys. I'm an agonist. I can actually find a receptor to fit into. Yeah. Okay, so let's illustrate it one more time. Stand up, please. The person takes a drug. Go ahead. Charge. Okay, you stay there a while. Remove yourself. Okay? That's happened over and over again. Remember that one chart we had where it was showing euphoria? This person's feeling euphoria. You keep flooding it. You're flooding it. You're flooding it. You're flooding it. At some point, it's going to say, oh, wait a minute. This is not good. This is not good. I'm not supposed to be having this. So they take away receptors. There you go. And this is called downregulation. All together. 1, 2, 3. Downregulation. Okay, so when there's too, this is the part that gets confusing. When there's too many neurotransmitters, it downregulates. And when there's too few neurotransmitters, it upregulates. Okay, you can all have your seats again. Okay, let's go on. So here's just a picture that will help you remember when you have too few neurotransmitters. Maybe because you took a drug that caused you to make less neurotransmitters. Maybe you got sick and your body just naturally made less. You know, a lot of reasons why that could happen. Your body is working to keep you in homeostatic balance by creating more receptors. Okay, and the next picture is the opposite, downregulation. The first little picture up on the corner is regular, then you have a huge release of neurotransmitters, so it downregulates. It takes away receptors. I guarantee you that messes students up. And so the more you can encourage yourself to say that and think about it. Too much neurotransmitters, too many neurotransmitters, I have to take away. That means downregulation. Too few neurotransmitters, that means I have to build more receptors. That's called upregulation. So you're going to have to know the correlation between receptors and neurotransmitters. Remember that. Okay. He really needs to think about that. Okay. So here's an example of how this is working. The system changes over time. So when somebody is normal, they have some receptors filled. When they take, in this case it's an example of ecstasy, they're having more receptors filled. And then afterwards there's a decrease, and so while those receptors are going, hey, what about me? You used to fill me. Hey, what about me? You used to fill me. That's withdrawal. That's like I'm expecting to be filled. Okay, let's go on. The other thing is that this is a picture. We use that word agonist. I want you to know agonist. An agonist is a look-alike, okay? A look-alike. And so drugs have different degrees that they look alike. Something that is a full agonist looks very similar to the natural neurotransmitter. And remember how I said that the receptor can open up to let ions in? It's going to really open up that receptor to let ions in. Some can be partial agonists, some can block, and so on and so forth. So here's again that picture you've seen before. Here's an agonist. Methadone is an agonist. Heroin is an agonist. They're both agonists for the natural endorphins that are in the brain. An antagonist is a blocker. All right, let's go on. Now, this is going to be our last little bit. So let's kind of hang through this, and then I'll take questions at the end. A drug can increase or decrease the amount of a neurotransmitter that's manufactured. Remember the 8 ways I said drugs can impact the system? So a drug can either make more neurotransmitters or decrease the amount of neurotransmitters, okay? A drug can increase or decrease the amount of a neurotransmitter that's released. So it might not, even though there's plenty there, it might only release some. A drug's size or shape can resemble a neurotransmitter enough to fire the receptor, okay? It's like the key in the lock. That's the example that's used a lot. The lock is the receptor, and the key can go into it. And something that's a look-alike can go into it, and that look-alike is called an agonist. A drug can enhance the binding action of a neurotransmitter to its receptor site. So if the drug stuck on, or excuse me, if the neurotransmitter stayed on that receptor longer, it's going to generate more electricity. Okay, let's go on. A drug can resemble a neurotransmitter enough to bind to its receptor, but not enough to fire it. In other words, it blocks it, and it mimics the neurotransmitter's action. In other words, it becomes an antagonist. So remember again to differentiate in your mind an agonist from an antagonist. We saw a picture of number 6. A drug can block a neurotransmitter's uptake pump or uptake channels, thereby extending or intensifying the action of a neurotransmitter until enzymes destroy the neurotransmitter. Drugs can inhibit the enzyme, which normally destroy the neurotransmitter, leading to an excess of neurotransmitters. And drugs can affect the second messenger system in the postsynaptic membrane, thereby affecting a neuron's firing rate or metabolic activity. So hold on a second while I talk about that. We were going to act out, but we're actually out of time. We're not going to be able to. But I had asked Larry to be an enzyme. So what I want you to visualize is that if Larry was the enzyme taking out neurotransmitters and destroying them, casting them aside, like I was going to have him grab some of our neurotransmitter actors and just pull them out, okay? If I'm a drug that stops that, I would bind Larry from being able to do that. I wouldn't allow him to do that. Okay, so those are the 8 ways that drugs can impact this system. Now, do you have to memorize all 8 ways? No, you don't. So don't waste your brain power memorizing the 8 ways. They should make sense to you, but I don't expect you to write out the 8 ways. What I do expect and require is that you know all of those neuron parts that we've been talking about from last week to today. I really expect you to understand up and down regulation and be able to label and illustrate all of that. I think this is the end. This knowledge is going to lead to more effective treatments to help those who do not respond to present treatments. All this is making me tired. Can we stop now?